Summertime blues.
You're listening to BBC Radio Manchester. It's Mike Shaft with you till 4 o'clock. Now, few former sports stars can genuinely be described as a living legend, but without a doubt, one of them is Richie Benaud. The former Australian cricket captain and commentator is here in Manchester to promote his book, My Spin on Cricket, and it gives me the ultimate pleasure to say good afternoon, Richie Benaud.
And very good afternoon, Mike. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for being here. You're here, of course, in the city to look at the test match between England and Pakistan. Not much of a match that, was it, really?
Well, not much for Pakistan, but England, I've just come back from Australia. I was 3 days down there where Channel 9 are doing promotions for the coming season. Intense interest in the middle of the football season in what's coming up for the Ashes. So I got back just in time to do writing work on Saturday, and then suddenly the game was over. So England, very happy about that, particularly about the performances of Steve Harmison and Monty Panesar. But the whole team played well. There were two fellas made centuries and they looked good in the field, they were sharp. So this comes after a few injury problems. And I've been downplaying the injury problems because there's still 15 weeks to go before the first test match in Brisbane. So they've got plenty of time. They could have a dozen fast bowlers ready for the Australians by the time that moment comes up at the Gabba in Brisbane.
And why did England manage to perform so well, especially without Flintoff?
They lift themselves, and quite often that happens with cricket teams, teams in other sports as well. But certainly in the times I played, if we had an injury to a top-class player, other players would lift themselves and perform. They might not do it again when the fella comes back, but they do it automatically. They know that they've got to lift and just produce something a bit extra, a bit special.
Could it be almost the opposite, that when Flintoff is there, everybody's waiting for him to win the test?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that does happen. I'm not trying to compare Flintoff with Bradman, but when Bradman played, the batsmen in the team knew that the odds were that he was going to make a lot of runs. So they might well relax, or they might feed off Bradman, thrashing the bowling at the other end. So yes, that can certainly happen. Flintoff being an all-rounder in the mould of, say, Miller, who used to play for Australia and played so well. His batting, bowling and fielding, players can relax when they're in the team with a fellow with that ability. And it works both ways.
Now, I've got a bit of a problem, I have to tell you, and as a broadcaster yourself, you may be able to help me out here, because I'm never quite sure when to ask the difficult question. Because if I leave it till the end, then we won't be friends when you leave. And if I do it now, it might spoil the rest of the interview, so I'm going to do it now anyway. The Headingley test, you don't talk much about it in the book.
The Headingley test?
Yes, the Botham test.
Well, I've talked about it in other books.
Oh, right, okay.
But the thing with the Headingley test was that until this last series in 2005, the Headingley test and that series in 1981 was the greatest with which I'd ever been associated. It was simply fantastic that England could have come back and won there, because they booked out of their hotel on the fourth morning of the match, all the players, and they were ready to go. And both of them hit his century, and then Willis bowled out Australia. So that has always been, and Jim Laker agreed with me, we were commentating on the same test there, he agreed that it was the greatest game and the greatest series eventually. Well, now, last year, the 2005 series, where England regained the Ashes, that for me has taken over, and that is now the greatest series I've ever been associated with.
But that Botham test, you don't think there was anything questionable about the play in that game?
Oh, no. Well, it was just that Botham went out and smashed them all over the place, and it came as a surprise to the Australians, and I think it possibly came as a surprise to Ian as well, because he really did go out and just throw the bat, and it came off. And really, the captain who'd just taken over from Botham, he was waving and making sure that Botham was settled down. It was all palm of the hands facing Botham, and just bear in mind we're in with a chance here, which it turned out they were, and Willis bowled well. No, the game itself, the Australians thought they had it, and England just tore it away from them.
What made you decide to write the book?
I was due to, it was 1998 when I wrote my last book before this one, Anything But an Autobiography. And with this one, I'd said I'd write another book, but I decided to do it differently. And this one is quite a different style from other books I've written, which have had all sorts of autobiographical details in them. But this one is a series of essays. And what I did, I started off with 60 headings. And in the end, I knew I had to get it down to 20 headings and then write 20 chapters, because it was around about 80,000 words for the whole book. So I did. I eliminated some of the best and most interesting things that have ever happened to me, and I came up with 20 headings. Then I wrote those chapters. But you could finish a chapter in this book and turn the page, and the next page would bear no relation to what's gone on. The first time I've ever done it, and I liked it. You do need to enjoy what you're writing, and I suddenly found that I was enjoying writing this book because it was something I'd not done before.
You're listening to BBC Radio Manchester. My very special guest is Mr. Richie Benaud. Back with him right after this.
2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester, Mike Shaft with you for this Monday afternoon. And I have to tell you this little story. On Saturday, I woke up and my missus said to me, "What are you doing today?" And I said, "I've got to read this book by Richie Benaud. It's called My Spin on Cricket." And all day Saturday, I just sat there and did nothing else but read this book and listen to my music in the background. It was a most enjoyable day and a most enjoyable book. You're 75 years old now, and you've seen probably more cricket than anybody else in the world. What are the big changes you've noticed over the years?
Night cricket is the biggest change, I think. When World Series cricket came in 1977 and we started to play matches at night in Australia, everyone before that, they'd have laughed at you if you said, we're going to start night cricket. And the first big match I ever saw under lights was at Sydney. We'd played a few matches down in Melbourne as well. But in Sydney, we had the game November 28, 1978, and it was fantastic. They opened the gates. Normally you close the gates on a crowd, but they opened the gates, and the 52,000 people in the SCG, and it really only holds 45,000 now for safety and health reasons. And that was a fantastic game and the most extraordinary atmosphere. And when in 1990 Angus Fraser came out to Australia, I saw him standing. He was playing with Western Suburbs in the club competition. I saw him standing just down below our commentary box. And I went down, there's a night game being played, and I said, "G'day Gus, how are you?" So we chatted away. He said, "I've got to get back here," because he wasn't in the England side at the time. He said, "I've got to get back. I've just got to play in one of these matches." He said, "I've never known such atmosphere." So all sorts of things have happened over the years. The biggest changes have come from World Series cricket in 1977 and limited overs cricket that really funds Test cricket. And from an Australian point of view and the players' point of view, I've always been a player's man, and now the players receive a proper salary for their skills, which they didn't. At one stage, you played literally for peanuts, and you had to have a job. Nowhere in the world you could play cricket and not have a full-time job as well, because there was no money.
This year is the 40th anniversary of the Laker Test at Old Trafford, where he took 19 wickets in a single game. Firstly, what are your memories of that game? And reading the book, I know that your dad, it wasn't a test, but he took 20 wickets in a game, didn't he?
Yes, he did. My main memory from the 1956 game, or two main memories really, is that Tony Lock only got one wicket, and that I was two of Lakers, which is unusual, and it was an extraordinary game because we thought we were going to be saved by rain on the last day, and we'd just played two matches, one at Lord's on a very good pitch. Miller got 10 wickets for the match. We won the game, and then we played at Headingley on a very, very ordinary pitch. It started to break up just after lunch on the first day. And we got here to Manchester, and it rained on both sides of the ground on the last day, but it didn't rain out in the centre of the ground. And Colin McDonald made runs. I was out there. I took a long time to make 18 in the second innings, having been out first ball in the first, caught on the boundary off Laker. But it was a freakish occurrence. And the great thing about Jim, and it taught me something as well, he was so calm. Whereas Lockie at the other end was getting more and more head up because he couldn't get a wicket. And he caught 2 of Jim's in the second innings. Jim had taken 10 against us earlier in the summer. I wasn't playing in the game. It was at Surrey, and we were out having a game of golf and got back in, and someone said, Jim Lake has taken all 10 wickets in the innings against you guys. And I think we made about 260, 270. Jim got 10 for 88, I think, and Lockie none for 100. So it was a preface for what was going to happen at Manchester later on. My father, you mentioned, he was a very, very good cricketer, quite possibly the best country cricketer in the Depression years in Australia. And he got his 10 for 30 and 10 for 35. In those days, they played on each ground. They played the first Saturday on the Penrith ground and the second Saturday on St Mary's ground, so that there could be no favouritism in the pitches. And he was a very, very good cricketer, a leg spin bowler and a good all-rounder and a school teacher. And several times he was asked by the state selectors to go down to trial at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and the education department would never give him the opportunity. And in 1923-4 he took his 20 wickets in the match, and I think it's the only time it's ever been done in what you might term a proper match. This was a game played about 30 miles out of Sydney in a full competition.
One of the things you write about in the book is a story of Hansie Cronje, and you say how sad it is that you never got to meet him. I don't want to speak too much about him particularly, but are you concerned about the possibility that there is corruption in the game?
You mean there still is?
Yes. I
don't think there is. I'm the Australian representative on the Anti-Corruption Committee that exists within the ICC. Although it's an outside organisation that is beholden to no one. And they do have a very good method and system now that if there is any hint that anything is wrong with the match, they'll investigate it. And I think they've stopped it. You can never guarantee anything like that. But the committee on which I sit, I'm very happy with the way it works, and I think you can say, as far as you can say anything in this world, that there are no matches fixed these days, but there were.
There were. Are you at all bothered by the amount of cricket there is? Because I have to admit that I used to be a great fan of cricket, and over the years I've not lost interest because there are still great cricket games, but there seems to be cricket on all the time at the moment.
Yes, I think there is cricket on most of the time. I won't say all the time, but it might seem as though it's all the time. I'm not concerned with the amount of cricket because so long as it's on television and people are able to watch it, there are a lot of people who are in hospitals and unable to get to the grounds, and for them it's wonderful that they love cricket and they're able to watch it on television. And I'm talking here about hundreds of thousands of people for whom that's a benefit. Now, I don't think there's too much cricket being played, but what does worry me is the actual programming of it. And I don't think that the programming totally works. I think that needs some common sense and some changes. For example, New Zealand are hardly playing at all at the moment. They're just starting into a series. Australia played Bangladesh a couple of months ago, and they're going to have about 4 months off. They're training all the time. But I think that shows poor programming, that sort of thing can happen, whereas India... it seems to be non-stop cricket there. And in England, you've got your set amount of matches. I think the England programming is pretty good now. With the 10 test match teams, although I don't think Bangladesh and Zimbabwe should be two of those. I think what is a good thing is that they're playing one another at the moment, and they're going to be playing A teams from other countries. I don't think their standard is good enough yet. That to Zimbabweans and to Bangladeshis will sound cruel. It possibly is cruel, but it's also practical, because until they get their standard up by playing against one another and other sides of their own standard, then I think there's something slightly false about the programming. But on the question of some teams playing a lot and some seeming like the Australians not to be playing much at the moment, I think that shows I know we've got two hemispheres and it's not easy to get it right, but I think that shows a certain lack of planning or a certain inability to get the programming right.
The state of West Indies cricket, what do you make of it, and whose fault is it?
We need West Indies cricket to be strong. That's the first thing. Now, the people who played against the West Indies in the 80s when they had all their fast bowlers will laugh at that, and they might be inclined to grab me by the shirt front and tie and say, what the hell are you talking about? But I believe we need West Indies cricket to be strong. In fact, West Indies cricket is bankrupt. They owe, according to figures I saw the other day, something like 34.9 million, and the players haven't been able to get proper contracts, and so there's something drastically wrong with the administration in West Indies cricket, and it needs to be fixed.
You do a list of some of your greatest players, and you have Shane Warne in your list, which doesn't surprise me. But where would you put Lance Gibbs as compared to Shane Warne?
Well, I'd find it difficult to compare the two, one being the off-spinner and the other one a leg spinner. What I can say is that Shane Warne, in my view, and you've always got to add in my view to a thing like that, is the greatest leg spinner there's ever been. Lance Gibbs is one of the finest off-spinners ever to walk onto a field. So there's a difference there. I rate him very highly, but one I'm rating at the top and the other one as being in a group at the top.
And technology, finally. If Hawkeye is as good as everybody says it is, should it not be responsible for all LBW decisions?
When Hawkeye can tell me that they will guarantee me that what they put on the screen is 100% correct, then I will utter the words, and Hawkeye says, until that happens, and it stays at 95%, I won't see that.
Richie Benaud, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Congratulations on all that you've achieved and all that there is still to achieve for you. Congratulations on the book. It's called My Spin on Cricket. Costs $8.99. You'll find it on The Sport, and it's published by Hodder. Thank you very much indeed.
Been a great pleasure to be here. It's been fun.
Withdrawal symptoms